Hello students, I am Renu Matthew, Assistant Professor, MC Department, IISM Pune.
Today we will learn how to estimate the size of a software using function points. We have already learned that the lines of code is dependent upon the source code, and the source code is dependent upon the language, technology, or the tool which is used for writing or building the software. But function point is a technique which is technology neutral. It does not matter what technology you are using to implement your software. It does not matter if it is a web application written in Java, PHP, or in a .NET framework. It also does not depend upon the development methodology or the capability of the project team as well. What it actually does is it measures the functionality of the software that is being produced from user's perspective. Now, what do you mean by user's perspective? By user's perspective, we mean the size of the software is measured based on the user's view of the system, like what the user has asked for, not what is delivered to the user as a product. It is based on the way the user interacts with the system, including the screens that the user uses to enter input and the reports the user will receive as output from the system. It is also based on their understanding of the data that needs to be stored and processed by the system. These features are considered when we are estimating the size of the software through function points. From this, we can understand that function point measures software by quantifying its functionality provided to the user based primarily on the logical design. It assesses the functionality delivered to its user based on the user's external view of the functional requirements. It measures the logical view of an application, not the physically implemented view or the internal technical view. Now let us understand the categories of function points. Based on the interaction of the software components internally and with external users or applications, they are categorized into two types: transactional functional type and data functional types. The transactional functional type, which represents the data in motion, are the external inputs, the external outputs, the external inquiries or queries. The second type, that is data functional type, represents the data in rest. It involves logical files and external interface files. External inputs. These are largely data entry screens or electronic data input from another application. External inputs processes data or control information that comes from outside the application's boundary. So the EIs is an elementary process. External outputs or EOs. These are typically reports or output files or screens. EO is also an elementary process that generates data or control information which is sent outside the application's boundary. External queries or inquiries. These are messages or external function-based communication into or out of the application. EQ is also an elementary process made up of an input-output combination that results in data retrieval. Internal logical files are typically the files by the application or the tables in the database. ILFs are user identifiable group or logically related data or control information maintained within the boundary of the application. Whereas external interface files are file-based inputs or outputs to or from the software with which the software being developed will interact with. So EIFs are group of user recognizable logical related data reference to the software, but it is maintained within the boundary of another software. In short, we can say that FPs or function points of an application is found out by counting the number and types of functions used in the application. The external inputs are counted based on for input screens and tables. External outputs are counted based on output screens and reports. External inquiries or queries are counted based on prompts and interrupts. And internal logical files are counted based on databases and directories. And finally, external interface files are counted based on shared databases and shared routine. The basic and primary purpose of the function point analysis is to measure and provide the software application functional size to the client or customer and to the stakeholders. Before learning how to calculate function points, let's understand the concept of data element types. Record element type and file type reference on the basis on which the function points are rated. Data element type can be defined as a single, unique, non-repetitive data field which is there in the application. Record element type can be defined as a group of data element types. In a more generic way, we can say that, or we can call it as a table of data fields. File type reference, that is FTR, can be defined as a file type referenced by a transaction, that is an input, output, or an inquiry. This can be either an internal logical file or it can be an external interface file. That is, all the function points are rated based on data element types and record element types or the file type reference. For rating external inputs, external outputs, external queries, we use FTRs and data element types. Similarly, for rating internal logical files and external interface files, we use record element types and data element types. The number of function points are also impacted by the technological factors. FPA takes into account 14 factors like data communications, distributed data processing required, the performance, that is the response time or the throughput, heavily used configuration, the transaction rate, the percentage of online data entry required, the end user efficiency, whether online update is required, whether there are complex algorithms or logic involved, the reusability and the operational or installation ease, whether the application is designed for multiple sites, and the ease with which a change is facilitated. So each factor or characteristic has associated descriptions that will help determine the degree of influence of these factors. And the degree of influence for all of these 14 factors are assessed on a scale of 0 to 5. If a particular technical adjustment factor has no influence, then its weight is taken as 0. And if it has a strong influence, then its weight will be 5. Now let us learn the method for calculating function points based on all the 5 categories of function points and based on the technical adjustment factors. The first step is to categorize function points into external inputs, external outputs, external queries, ILF and EIF, and then rate it. The second step is to multiply the number of functions in each category by the appropriate complexity. The complexity can be low, average, or high, and get the unadjusted function points. We have already learned that the number of function points are also impacted by the technological factors. So the third step is to calculate the technical adjustment factor for all those 14 factors which are identified. And it is calculated using the formula 0.65 plus 0.01 multiplied by the total degrees of all the 14 factors, which is an empirically found. And the last step is to calculate the adjusted function point using the formula unadjusted function points multiplied by the technical adjustment factors which we have calculated in the previous step. Once you have the size in FP, then you can calculate the efforts in hours or days by using your organization's historical data or using the data which is available on the public domain. For example, for software development in C++ language or in Oracle, it requires 16.5 hours for implementing one FP. So students, today we have learned how to estimate function points and efforts. Thank you.